Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for coming to our event here today on Article 6. It's very noisy outside. I hope everyone can hear as well. And this is great to welcome you. This is very exciting times for us. We're actually doing that together. Colleagues from the Ministry for Energy and Climate are here, and colleagues from our side, the Ministry for Development Cooperation, are here. And we're going to do the co-moderation together with my colleague here, Marlin Alberg. And without much further ado, I'd like to sort of very quickly sort of get us going on what we're actually talking about today. It's really about how to get a very robust setup on Article 6 in the countries with our partner countries. We have a couple of very, very high-level guests that are really into the things and can talk us through the challenges on the ground and their experiences on the ground. So we're really excited about that. But it's going to be difficult not only for sellers but also buyers. So what are the real challenges on the ground? What are we talking about? What are the needs on the ground and for capacity building, etc.? So really excited to have you all here today. And with that, I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker, Birgit Schwenk. She's Director General in the Ministry for Energy and Climate, and will give us the keynote speech. Unfortunately, there's my colleague coming, Heike Hin, on a limb. Okay, great. So you're here. So please, Mrs. Schwenk.
Yes, thank you very much, Annette, and I'm very happy to see so much interest in this side event and would like to welcome you all here also on behalf of the Ministry for Economic Affairs, Energy and Climate Action. And the title of the side event says it all, what we want to speak about. I hope the sound is okay. It's always been a bit difficult here in the pavilions. So the title, as I said, is actually what this whole side event is about, boosting the carbon markets and Germany's support for developing countries to use Article 6 to raise ambition and accelerate sustainable development at the same time. So an international carbon market is an essential part of a successful climate transition worldwide. And for Germany, the use of Article 6 starts with good capacity building. Since some countries know better than others how to use Article 6, and some are still struggling with the rules. And so there seems to be broad consensus, I think, that strengthening support for capacity building in the implementing countries with respect to the robust implementation of Article 6 is sort of high on this agenda. There are multiple layers to this when it comes to good capacity building, and I would like to highlight 3 of these in my welcoming remarks where we are engaged in. The first one is that we need to anchor capacity building firmly in the countries and in the region. And I'll go a bit into more detail about this in a second. The second is we would like to foster exchange also among the countries and with other stakeholders that we need for a successful implementation. And third, support for a country-driven regional collaboration. That is our third aspect. So on the first one, one might call it localizing capacity building in the sense that the know-how among all stakeholders and the build-up of sustainable capacity structures in line with countries' NDCs and also their long-term climate goals. So capacity building should enable countries to use Article 6 strategically, to implement their own NDCs, and also to enhance ambition over time. There is a demand then to tailor activities to the needs of individual countries. Some may be already relatively far along this process, while others may still have a long way to go and are only really starting on this role. So ensuring that the countries themselves have an integral role to play in developing these agendas for such trainings, that makes it sure that the country's specific needs are addressed in the support for implementation of Article 6. And it's also important in that sense that we involve the national and regional consultants rather than just coming in with international consultants to enhance capacities. Oops, about the sound. There is a sound issue, I think. Is it okay? Okay. So maybe it's just up here that it sounds a bit difficult. So once again, it's crucial to involve the local and regional experts to enhance capacities also outside the governmental institutions and involve all stakeholders of the carbon market. So, second one, we would like to foster exchange and engage as many stakeholders as possible, also beyond the public sector. That's important to build a wider knowledge base, and we want to specifically engage with the private sector and provide capacity building for them as well, and ensure that there is an ongoing dialogue between the private sector and the public sector. Just to give you an example, we have a project inside our International Climate Initiative, the so-called ICI. The project is called Supporting Preparedness for Article 6 Cooperation, and that is provided for 4 partner countries, and that is Colombia, Pakistan, Thailand, and Zambia in that case, and where we would like to ensure that both the government and the private sector and other stakeholders are addressed. And there is also important work to be done on outreach and on dissemination of the lessons learned. And so we'd like to provide a toolbox for best practice, guidance to be developed with the countries and with other stakeholders. And we are also providing there an exchange forum for practitioners. That is called the Community of Practice for Article 6 Implementing Countries. And that was launched last week here at COP 27. And that forum will be open for other countries as well. You might be interested in that. So, third point that I had mentioned was regional collaboration. And that's embedding regional activities into existing initiatives. So, the Eastern African and Western African alliances on carbon markets and climate finance, they are very good examples here. As both alliances are based on the principle of being a country-driven initiative, led by country focal points. These activities are carried out based on country requests. And, well, as I said it, countries are in the best position to identify where their needs are, where their requirements are, and the alliances can effectively target those gaps. So they serve as a platform for knowledge exchange, and countries can share their experiences with other countries who are in a similar situation and face similar challenges and opportunities. And I think these 2 alliances can really become international role models. And their development has been followed very positively also by other countries. For instance, there is interest in a number of Caribbean countries to advance a collective mechanism on carbon markets and climate finance, just as the alliances just mentioned. And we are happy to be supporting also this process. And I think this is for a few introductory remarks. We're very happy to be able to work closely together with the Development Cooperation Ministry, and I can just hand over to Heike Henn, please.
Thanks so much. I think those were excellent introductory remarks. Already very, very hands-on, very practical, lots of things to actually discuss and pick up on later. I've now the pleasure to introduce my boss to you. Heike Henn, Dr. Heike Henn. She's Director for Climate, Energy and Environment in the Ministry for Development Cooperation. And she's going to talk to us about the additional project Germany provides also on Article 6, and we have various cooperation partners. So please go ahead, Heike. Thanks very much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Annette. Thank you so much, Birgit. And great to be here. And you see, the spirit of cooperation already of the German government, so I won't tell you the same as Birgit did. And also, we are very eager to start this conversation with you, and I was running so fast to make this happen. So great. I mean, maybe you said it in the beginning. That was the minute I missed when I was still running. I mean, Article 6 is, of course, also about finance. Financing is all around us in the negotiation rooms, but also in the pavilion. So implementation needs finance. And talking about Article 6, and this is why I flag this here, is from the perspective of the German government, not at all about shying away from the 100 billion, from public engagement, from public financing, but more or less the other way around, how we can join forces to shift really the trillions that we need for the Paris Agreement and the Sustainable Development Goals, and get the money out there where the needs are for mitigation, adaptation, and the likes. So this is why we are here. And Birgit is from the Ministry for Climate Action, so I will be a bit short on the climate aspects and focus more on what we see also can come out of Article 6 together with the impacts we need on climate, is impacts on Sustainable Development Goals. Because it's NDC implementation, but also sustainable development. And we want to bring this together with really specific elements and also a concrete program for collaboration. So what is important from our perspective to make this happen? And I think you had 3 elements. I have 3 as well. So just too much coordination. So the first is informed decision making. Because around Article 6, I mean, it's complicated anyways, and we want to make it also a bit more easier. But also, if we want to have these win-win impacts on development and climate, you really have to have a decision-making process that makes partner countries make the best use of Article 6 in the sense that you use Article 6 for the most costly and complicated endeavors, and use for your NDC implementation the easier ones, and not the other way around. So let people harvest the easy investments in Article 6, while the country rests with the really hard to abate or difficult elements within the NDC. Second aspect, we need an integrated approach. Climate, sustainable development, leaving also the silos that we maybe all are working in. And therefore, this is the third aspect, we need really a cooperative approach. Different partners also within our institutions, like we are trying to show here today. Because we can only bring up the full potential of Article 6 if internationally, but also within country, we can bring all stakeholders together. And therefore, I think the program that we, from the development side of things, want to bring into practice is focusing on the necessary capacities to make this happen. And I think to make this happen, we also need an enabling environment, interministerial groups, not only for events, but also in country. We also need better exchange and dialogue with private sector, and not like once and again, but really institutionalized. And we also need more inclusive processes, because there are so many questions around on Article 6, also fears, and it's really a difficult discussion to have, and that will be easier and better in the outcomes if we bring in civil society and different groups of society to on country level also, and of course on international level as well, into this discussion. So with a new program for 3 million euros, we want to start working with countries to make this happen, a more integrated and strategic use of Article 6, with partner countries Peru, Rwanda and South Africa. if I'm not mistaken, and try to support a tailor-made approach, because it's not one size fits all. The needs are also different, and really create jointly the environment that is necessary to get not only the discussion going, but see concrete impacts on the ground. And therefore, happy to be here, and happy to see what the distinguished panelists will bring to the discussion, and let's really bring Article 6 jointly into practice to bring more finances on the ground.
Thanks so much. Okay, I'm now handing over for our panel to my co-moderator, Marlin.
Yes. Thank you very much. It was a really great kickoff of this event with the both keynote speakers. I think they set perfectly the scene for how we would like to enhance capacity building in countries. And yes, I would like to invite our 4 panelists to come up here and start our panel discussion. Please, I have Suparnat, Osman, and Herman. I will sit here. So, yes. Thank you. So I start to introduce them before we start the discussion. So on the left hand we have Herman Hakuzimana. He is Climate Change Program Manager at the Rwanda Environment Management Authority. And next to him we have Ousmane Falsa. He's from the Senegal delegation and also in the lead of the coordination of the West African Alliance on Carbon Pricing and Climate Finance. Next to him we have Suparnat Chotevitayatarakon. I have improved since the last time. He is from the Thai delegation. He is the lead negotiator on Article 6, and he is program manager at the Thailand Greenhouse Gas Organization, TGO. Last but not least, we have here Milagros Sandoval from Peru, DG on climate change at the Ministry of Environment. So I would like to give the floor to all the panelists to set the scene from their country perspective with one question to all of you. So what are the most important capacity building needs in your country for Article 6? As this is important, otherwise we are not able to make a tailor-made capacity building, but also Heike Hen told that this is an important approach for good capacity building in countries. So may I ask you to kick off the first intervention, please?
Sure.
I think... could you hand over to Milagros? The mic?
It should work.
It's working?
Yeah.
Okay. No. Okay. Good afternoon, colleagues, and thank you very much for the invitation. As mentioned previously, we're working very closely with Germany on capacity building issues as well, and definitely that's super important for us. And I would like to bring you a little bit of what we're doing and how this links to capacity building. Peru is probably the first country that has put into place its national registry for mitigation measures. This process and it's a procedure inside the Ministry of Environment as Climate Change Authority. This registry has 3 main objectives: to register all mitigation measures, including measures related to the NDC, measures related to the voluntary carbon, as well as measures related to Article 6. So it is overarching, and it includes the 5 sectors that we report under the greenhouse gas emission inventory. This process and specifically the idea of this registry and the procedures that are linked to this include a way in which we are going to inform everybody that is interested in issues related to also including to all these measures. But specifically, it also is going to be the procedure through which we authorize the transference of emission reductions. So based on this is like the basis of where we are right now building our capacity building efforts. Why? Because to engage in a participatory process, to include different stakeholders in, and so that stakeholders can understand the legislation or the specific regulation that we're working on, and specifically also how we're going to specify the procedures and give legal security not only at an international level but also at the national level, and how safeguards are going to be implemented and put in place. It is important that we have this building block that helps us with capacity building process. How are we going to engage? Definitely a first step has been engaging indigenous peoples. We have been working with indigenous peoples, especially with our 7 organization representative of indigenous peoples in the whole country. We are trying to build capacities with them related to this process so that they can engage and also respect their rights related to this process. And obviously, the second step right now is including the other sectors, which include obviously the Ministry of Energy, the Ministry of Production, among other ministries, and how we can engage in this process. How will we engage? Under the framework of our governance process, that is through our high-level Commission on Climate Change, where in this space we decide what mitigation and adaptation measures are adopted and so to achieve our NDC goal. So also this will include, obviously, this process related to capacity building will include as well civil society, as well as other and especially subnational governments, through which they will be engaging in this process. But the important message that I want to convey is related to that we have put in front this procedure, this regulation, that will enable different stakeholders to engage in this process. But obviously, a first step to engage and really understand is to build capacities, not only at the national level, but also at the local and subnational levels throughout the different stakeholders, and especially indigenous peoples, because of the importance of and the diversity of Peru in relation to this process. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That sounds that you have already really, you're middle in the process already on your journey to Article 6 implementation. That's great to hear. So I pass over to Supernat. Would you like to share your experience in Thailand, and where are you right at the moment in regard to capacity building needs?
Thank you very much, Melinda, and also thank you to the German government for inviting us to join this panel. For Thailand, we are currently in the stage of starting the first pilot project under Article 6. And through this process, what we are experiencing is that we are more in a step like learning by doing. We are experiencing what are the necessary capacity that different ministries, different stakeholders need to implement Article 6. And for us, I think through this process, one of the important things that we think is one of the urgent priorities in terms of the areas where necessity capacity is needed. One of those is in terms of understanding how to set up comprehensive strategies to engage in Article 6 to ensure that this approach, the projects, the activities that we are doing support, enhance ambition of the NDC and not to undermine the ability of the NDC to achieve through domestic efforts. And this is one of the areas that involve a large number of stakeholders, the line ministries that involve in sectoral greenhouse gas reduction plans, but also the stakeholders that involve in this project. And in these areas, we think in Thailand, we already, through the past years, we already have in place the guideline on how we are going to engage in Article 6. We have the infrastructure, our national registry system, which can support the tracking of mitigation outcomes. We have in place the underlying mitigation activity standards for our engagement in Article 6. But we know that we still see that there are definitely a large areas where capacity building is needed. And as I mentioned earlier, how to ensure that all stakeholders in our country know which are the priority activities, what are the eligible types of technologies that are needed to for Article 6 to ensure that also not in terms of implementation of the NDC alone, but also to support countries in moving toward net zero emissions as well. So this is one of the areas where we think is very important and it's quite a priority. And we also appreciate the support that that's coming from international partners, including from IGI project. And we look forward very much to start on that project on this activity.
Thank you very much. Yes, we are also looking forward to make a deep dive into the NDC of Thailand and see where also work together with you to explore which part are really feasible for Article 6 activities. And I think for us, it's also good that you as the Thai government are aware of that there is also a risk of overselling. So therefore, it's important really to understand what kind of NDC do we have and where are room for Article 6 activities that enhance the NDC, but also support the sustainable development in countries. So now I would like to move to Osman, and I think you can of course speak on on the capacity building needs in Senegal, but for sure you can also talk about West African countries as you are the lead coordinator of the alliances. So very happy also to hear your views on the regional aspects of capacity building needs. So the floor is yours.
Thank you, Malin. And first of all, I would like on behalf of the 16 countries member of the West African Alliance on Carbon Markets and Climate Finance to thank the German government for their constant support to our alliance, because since 2017 we've been supported in our activities by the German government, and we are really grateful for that. As you mentioned, I can make an intervention on the perspective of the West African region and Senegal also, because with our alliance we've managed to make a kind of gap assessment for the 16 West African countries in terms of readiness for Article 6. And the main issue that we can consider as very urgent in the short term in terms of capacity building are awareness raising for both political and private sector perspective, the elaboration of a clear policy for Article 6 implementation and Article 6 strategy in our countries, and also work on the institutional and regulatory framework that is required for Article 6 operationalization at a host country level. And the third issue that we see as a very urgent capacity need is the transition of CDM to Article 6, because we have in most of our countries a portfolio of CDM projects that need to be transitioned to Article 6, and most of the project developer, like the private sector, they still don't know how to do it. At the host country level, we need to give a clear signal to how this should be done in the coming years. And the fourth issue is the infrastructure that is needed at the host country level. My colleague from Thailand talk about the registry. We have also the same objective in West African countries, and mainly in Senegal, where we have already implemented many pilots in different sectors, but we need to have a national registry for Article 6. And as I already mentioned earlier, Senegal has piloted several activities in terms of Article 6 readiness, and we have been involved in the process of experimenting what we call the standardized crediting framework with the support of the World Bank, and Senegal is willing to use this framework as the national reference for market mechanism. And this needs to be really improved, and we are on the process of extending the scope of this mechanism, because initially in the pilot phase we just targeted the electricity sector, but we need to expand it to all sectors where we have some mitigation project. And one of the most important issues with the standardized crediting framework, we want to use it as a national mechanism, but we need to have all actors at a host country level. And the most challenging issue is to identify local verifier, and also to train them to be in a position to do all the auditing and the verification at a host country level. So we have started the process of identification of key potential auditors, and we will later on improve their capacity. And in terms of operationalization of Article 6, we have already in Senegal signed 2 bilateral agreements with Switzerland and with Japan also, and we are also negotiating with Singapore. So this is in a nutshell what we are now doing in Senegal in the short run, but in the long run we also are thinking of how to operationalize the carbon pricing instrument, because we've gone through the process of identification of a carbon pricing instrument, and we end up by selecting the carbon tax. But we need to see how best we can link this carbon pricing instrument and the crediting mechanism that we have to put in place. So in terms of capacity building, there is a lot of activities that have been already identified to see how best we can make the linkage between our national crediting mechanism and the carbon pricing instrument that we are about to use in Senegal. And last but not least, from a sub-regional perspective, we are working in the West African Alliance to see how we can facilitate a sub-regional collaboration to be able at the end of the day to have an integrated sub-regional market in West Africa. Because, and we want to start from the electricity sector, because in West Africa we have already an integrated electricity market, and with the West African Power Pool we are now trying to see how to link this electricity market with an integrated carbon market in West Africa. In a nutshell, these are the main issues that we are working on, and in terms of capacity building we are working to mainly involve the private sector on Article 6, and it's a big ambitious, and we need to still count on the support of all our partners in the West African Alliance and from the Senegalese perspective also. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Osman. That was interesting. So now I'm curious to hear where Rwanda is standing and what top-up priorities you have in regard to capacity building. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, moderator. Like the previous speaker said, the capacity building is the key to be able to operationalize this Article 6 that you are talking about. Because as we all know, under Kyoto Protocol era, the role of a host country was only limited to issuance of letter of approval to project developers and no other responsibilities that the host country had. But currently things have changed, and with Article 6, there are many concepts that are new that need to be unfolded and be understood by everyone to be able even to understand what is required to the host country first. As Osman mentioned, Rwanda also implemented the standardized crediting framework with World Bank. It's where we tried to understand really what is needed to position ourselves to participate in Article 6 mechanisms. And from the pilot, we have set some institution, we have governing board, technical committee, but as he mentioned, to us pilot. Now because the readiness to Article 6 requires policy organization and institutional change from what existed. We are now at the level of setting the guidelines and the procedures.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And also raising awareness from public staff and also private sector to understand what are their role now under Article 6. And from there we expect, once we will be having all the guidelines and the procedures set in place, with required infrastructure. They mentioned the registries. We are also trying to set one for Rwanda, and also explain how what are the requirements to be able to put on market those emission reductions units, and how the registry will be working. We are at this stage, but the important thing is first to make people understanding. Sometimes even people may resist to the change. Especially for those who had the project under CDM, to explain them what is required to transition, for example, from CDM to the compliance mechanisms. This is the stage where we are now, but we are planning to have the guidelines and the procedures completed by March next year, where we will now have the start in another bigger campaign to explain people, but also to show what is existing now and show the opportunities. Thank you.
Okay, yes, thank you very much. That was a good overview about what's going on in all these countries, and I would conclude from this that every one of you have already started to set up committees and the first thinking about how you would like to integrate Article 6 in your policy framework. So now, Annette, you would like to start with the first question to the panel, please.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I found that hugely interesting, that it's despite all the differences regionally and globally, and also the advancement of implementation, you basically mentioned very similar issues that are obstacles for you, that are challenges for you. So looking forward to an exchange platform, I can really see sort of the advantages of that. For me, the question as coming from a development perspective is really what are the co-benefits in sustainable development policies and impacts really on the ground when you are talking about raising climate finance through Article 6. What can you imagine as how it benefits the local population, how it benefits the structures, as for sustainable development and the SDGs, looking into that. I'd really like to address this question to Milagros and Herman here, and maybe starting it off with Herman from our side this time.
Thank you very much for a very good question. Those projects aiming at generating those carbon carbon credits units, they are projects that also have other benefits, and even among the criteria for those projects to be eligible, they must be contributing to the sustainable development of countries. Under CDM, we used to assess them against a list of sustainable development criteria that we had. And I think it will not be different much because they have those projects must facilitate the penetration of technologies, for example, in the population. They must create jobs. They must contribute to the well-being of the population before generating those those emission reductions units. So under the procedures that we are developing, this criteria must be included to ensure that even if they generated the emission reductions unit, but also they left something to the country, they contributed to the development goal of the country. They have to be linked with our development programs. We have, like in Rwanda, we are aiming to be a low carbon and climate resilience economy by 2050. We have to reach this goal. Everyone has to contribute. Even those project developers who are bringing new projects, they have bring the project that fit in these already set goals. Another thing that I would say is that they have to contribute to improvement of the well-being, health. For example, if it's a project that reduces, for example, the biomass use, it has also to contribute to the reduction of those health disease. You know, we need to set the criteria so that those projects come and fit in the program that we have already set.
Thanks very much. Milagros, please.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you very much for the question, and I totally echo what my previous colleague has mentioned. There is no way Article 6 can be implemented in developing country if it doesn't link to sustainable development. Because that is definitely one of the reasons developing countries are engaging in this process. We are not big emitters. We do not have that so much emissions. So definitely what we see as part of this process is to support sustainable development. How? Additionally to the NDC. That's quite clear. And that's what I think we have to reflect and clarify. We are not speaking about the low-hanging fruit. We're speaking about further development, and that links very much to the first question that implies capacity building. How will we know what are those higher hanging fruits if we don't have capacity buildings at the national and subnational levels in order to identify which is linked to those higher fruits and also to sustainable development? Part of that process, in the case of Peru, is established right now through the proposal that we have with our registry, with these procedures that we're putting in place, because we're going to assess how these projects or initiatives can support sustainable development as well. If not, we will not really implement and really actively understand how this links to sustainable development. Part of this process always also is linked to the priorities and needs additionally from vulnerable groups. So we hope that this also engage and links to vulnerable groups, to, for example, proposals related with indigenous peoples, with other groups that are vulnerable in this process and that need to engage, but that need to understand what this implies in the overall process. So definitely it is quite clear for many of us in developing countries that this needs to link to sustainable development. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And with that, I'd like to hand over, but I saw you sort of raising your finger. Yeah. Is that okay?
I just wanted to raise one issue. Is due to the fact that Article 6, if we take Article 6.4, by definition, it targets sustainable development. And as Herman has said, in all of our countries we have sustainable development criteria for the eligibility of the projects. That's one thing. The other issue is when we talk about 6.4, we have now seen a growing demand from the voluntary markets, and also in general there is a huge potential for financial flow. But if we characterize the demand, we have a more demanding demand, if I can say that, because buyers are asking for high quality credits. And what do you mean by high quality credit? Environmental integrity and sustainable development goal to meet. So in our country, we are now trying to prepare ourselves to deliver high quality carbon credit by taking serious consideration of sustainable development goal and environmental and social safeguards in our projects. So that's how it is now being considered in the country.
Thanks very much, Osman. I think that's a very, very important point. And also thanks to the two other panelists. I think it really brought home the impact it can have, but also the harm it could possibly do if it's not done correctly and right.
Yeah.
He's smiling, yeah.
Thank you. Now my next question is both to Suparnath and Osman, and I would like to. You touched upon this issue already in your intervention, but I would like to go a little bit more, be more concrete, and which sector are particularly suitable for Article 6 in your view? I mean, of course, you are still on your way and you have not scrutinized everything, but what's, in your view, where do you see already with your knowledge in the background? I mean, you're no newcomer in the carbon market, so, or the other way around, asked which sector would need financial support from abroad, in your view, and what is the, how to say, not the low-hanging fruit which you are able to implement on your own. So whether you have already an idea, I think that would be great to share with the audience. So Suparnath, please.
Thank you very much, Melin, for that question, and that's also what we are trying to find out. But I think there are all sectors that have quite very interesting potentials to step up from what we have within our NDC. And what we would be looking to for priority sectors is those sectors that we think Article 6 can support in terms of enabling transfers and development of high advanced technologies and know-how, and also areas where there's a need for large amount of investments, whether in terms of infrastructure or in terms of enabling for those actions to take place. And we think when thinking about that, most of the priority sectors, we're looking at energy sectors. We can look into transportation, the infrastructure that need to move towards the EV, for instance, and also in the sector of industrial, where there are still some needs for further new technologies that would enable to decarbonize certain industries that's quite carbon intensive. But there are also potential in waste sector in terms of waste to energy. There are some areas where we are also thinking about how the agriculture sector and the forestry sector can also engage in this process. But we know, for instance, for agricultural sector, that there are, in the context of other countries, most of there are small farmers in most of the areas, so their engagement in Article 6 will be difficult, so they might not come in the early stage. But we think that there are some new technologies that can also be explored in those sectors.
So when you are talking about agriculture sector, then you think about removals, I assume, or also mitigation or emission reduction, sorry.
I think both, in terms of reductions of methane, for instance, into practices, but also, yes, removal as well.
Okay, thank you. So, Osman.
Yeah, thank you, Malin. A very interesting question. From Senegalese perspective, we have 5 sectors. The first one is the energy and specifically the electricity generation using renewable energy in general, and particularly the green hydrogen, because it's a new emerging technology, and I think that we need to have serious consideration for green hydro in our countries. The second sector is the transport sector, because we have already engage bilateral negotiation with Japan on that, and I think there is big interest on this sector. And as mentioned by my colleague from Thailand, the waste sector, waste to energy activity, and waste and agriculture by using compost in the agricultural sector. It's something that is very important in our country. And the fourth sector is the industry sector, energy efficiency in industry. So it is something that is really under consideration in Senegal. And last but not least, the nature-based solution, forestry, agroforestry activities. These are the main sectors that are now being subject to Article 6 in Senegal.
Okay, thank you. Yes. All right, we have to keep these in mind, these sectors, because of course also the capacity building needs should also then have this in mind, which kind of sector, because each sector has their specific knowledge need, how to say, on technical level.
Exactly.
Annette, please.
Thank you very much. It's just a very quick follow-up question. We touched upon that earlier on, and the exchanging experiences. I think that's something that we should also possibly explore a little bit further. We only have a couple of minutes left, but BMWK, the Ministry for Climate and Energy, in their project approach have this exchange platform. We are also intending to have this exchange platform. Maybe some of you already engaging that could elaborate on what's really useful for you in that. What could you envisage to do better? Are there any advice you have to give from other experiences how to do that? I mean, we'd like to broaden it and open it up to other people, other countries and engage more. But maybe there's already a couple of really concrete proposals and advice you can give. And I'd really like to open that up to the whole panel. Maybe you have jumped to that and.
Yes, I would say we were very keen on to hear your views on what kind of exchange fora you would like to, or you think is useful for your country, but also for your region. I mean, in the past we have made very good experience with the African Alliance in West and as well as in East Africa, so. And we think it's also important that countries also exchange among each other, because I think that they can learn from each other. So yeah, but please go ahead. Yes, please.
Yeah. I can go ahead. Actually, I think that strengthening capacities through also exchanges is part of this process, because many of us, as mentioned by my colleague, we are learning by doing. There's no one recipe or no size fits all. So definitely we have to learn between ourselves of what can work and what cannot work, or what can be feasible or not. In the region, in the Latin American region, I think we're almost in the same track. And that definitely is something also that we need to address. And learn from what has been working, from, for example, carbon pricing activities, from other types of programs or incentives that have been working on the ground, and how this can link to what we are right now engaging with related to Article 6. But definitely there's a need to disseminate all of these processes, but also I would not only say that it's government-led, but I think there also needs to be a vision in which we can exchange views and lessons learned with other stakeholders in our countries. Because this is not only, it's not only empowering the governments, it's also empowering our legislative branch. And I see at the back of the room one of my congressmen that is also supporting our process. And definitely it is needed, because in one way or another, while we are working on this process, we're going to find gaps, or we're going to have to find things to address, and that sometimes are not necessarily things that the executive branch can do. It's some things that maybe the legislative branch needs to address, or maybe how the stakeholders or indigenous peoples or other civil society members can exchange and bring views related to this process, what has worked or what has not worked. And especially, mainly, I think that we have to enhance and support participatory processes. Obviously, this in each case, national circumstances are different. Each country is totally different, but I think we can learn by what we have been doing around the world and how we can use also things that we have already been supporting throughout all of these years of working on climate change. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks so much. Please, Osman.
Yes, I can add something because in West Africa, we managed before starting the readiness process in West African countries, we've conducted a gap assessment for all the 16 countries. We realized that countries was not at the same level. Some was front runners, others was just starting the process. That's why we decided to elaborate what we call the Article 6 readiness blueprint that gives the main building blocks on which each country should focus to make itself ready for Article 6. But in the interaction that we've got with countries, because we have several types of countries in West Africa, we have French-speaking countries, English-speaking countries, and countries speaking Portuguese in West Africa. So we decided in terms of experience sharing, platform to put in place to facilitate exchange, to make this readiness process more interactive. And that's why we have in our action plan to improve our website and to transform it into a kind of dynamic capacity building tool that can be extended to a tool for facilitating matchmaking between buyers and sellers, interacting with the exterior and the interior from West Africa. But inside also West African countries, we have these 3 groups where we can facilitate interaction and replication of projects between the same region, the same neighboring countries. So we have started this process, and in terms of exchange sharing, it's something that we will enforce in the future. So it's key to have this kind of platform to facilitate exchange between countries and to facilitate peer-to-peer learning.
Yeah. Anybody else like to add on to that? Yes, please, Hammer.
Thank you very much.
We only have a couple of minutes left, but I'm really keen to hear that.
Be very short.
Yeah.
Yeah, as we all know, Africa did not benefit a lot from the carbon market under Kyoto Protocol. There are some projects, but compared to other parts of the region, we didn't benefit. One of the reasons is the insufficient knowledge of project development and management. So under this era now, Paris Agreement era, we have to learn from those lessons in the past and start with by including everyone, especially the private sector. This is why we want to include the private sector from the beginning, to have the same understanding and move together. That's what I want to add.
Okay. Supernat, I think you will echo the others.
Yes, I think, well, I will agree with everyone that has said before me, and I think even sitting here and listen to others, I think it's also quite beneficial. And we have experienced that before, where there's a lot of forum where a lot of countries come to share our experience, and I think we can always learn from each other. So this kind of forum is quite beneficial. Our recommendation, we think, as mentioned by many others, I think different countries are at different stage of development, so that the kind of platform would need to be flexible enough to accommodate different stage of in different countries. But I think it's also important to move towards, I think there are some discussion platforms that enable discussion at conceptual level, but it might be also beneficial to have a platform where we discuss in actual experience how each country is implement their own pilots, and we can learn from each other in that level as well. And I think that's something that would be interesting.
All right, I think we have to move question and answer after the session. I don't know, because our time is over and we have very strict time management here at this pavilion. Annette, will you wrap up the session today?
Thanks very much, Marlon. Yeah, I totally agree. Maybe there's a chance later on for exchange and between individual members of the public and our esteemed panelists. I'm actually extremely grateful for this exchange here, and it already showed the potential there is to learn from each other. And countries at various stages with various approaches, and I found that extremely interesting. Thank you so much for that. And I think we also learned a lot about the challenges, huge challenges, not just on infrastructure, but actually linking those potential additional finances to sustainable development, your own country-specific plans of development, and also in engaging stakeholders. We heard several times the private sector, how important it is to get the transition right from the CDM mechanism to the new framework now. We also heard about the importance of engaging the local communities, indigenous people, of actually creating co-benefits for those people. Extremely important to get that right. And for me particularly, it was also very, very interesting to hear about the various sectors and the huge difference in challenges you're facing in the sectors. And maybe that's also something that we can talk about more with our various project approaches. And so thank you again so much for coming and sharing your experiences with us. And with that, I'll close this panel.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much for coming.